some people criticize classical Arabic as saying it's outdated, it needs a renewal of sorts. And she points out that most of them probably aren't aware that the language already underwent that particular period of modernization and renewal. And that's why it's able to stand the test of time and still be in such prevalent use today. So at this point in his article, he tends to shift almost. It becomes a form of a love letter in a way for the classical Arabic language. And he really highlights at this point the beauty and the strength of the classical Arabic language and why it was able to persist for as long as it has. And it really comes down, according to him, to two main reasons. So the first is the structure of the language. So the structure of the language, for any of you familiar with it, it's really quite mathematical. It's almost like a formula in the way that it's built and the way that it's structured. So as a quick example to kind of highlight that point, on the right here, you'll see a picture of a tree that stems from three letters. Almost the majority of words in the Arabic language stem from a root that's made up of three letters. And depending on how you use the vowels in that word and depending on any prefixes or suffixes you add to it, you can create a different word that traces its meaning back to the original root. So for example, here you have the three letters that form the word alima, or to know or to understand. And if you were to say add an M or the letter mim at the beginning, you now have muallim, or someone who helps you know or understand. So in that way, by really just knowing the root, you can actually know a wealth of vocabulary that really lets you access the language in a much more powerful and influential way that's based on an understanding of the actual structure, as opposed to a lot of words that aren't related. So that's the first reason why, according to Said, the Arabic language, the classical Arabic language, is so powerful. The second reason is the language itself as a whole underwent a period of modernization in the late 19th century. This was a time period that was called the Nahda, or the Arab Renaissance. And during this time period, a group of men from Syria, Lebanon, Palestine, and Egypt actually used the same laws, the same structure of the Arabic language that had been used up to that date, but they used it to now introduce new vocabulary. So with all of the new modernization of the time period, they found that the language kind of lacked in some of the vocabulary that was needed. Even words like democracy didn't really have a parallel in the Arabic language at the time. So by using the same structure and following those same formulas, they were actually able to introduce a whole wealth of vocabulary into the language. And around 60% of the vocabulary that we use today in Arabic actually stems from the vocab that was introduced at that time. So Said points out that some people criticize classical Arabic as saying it's outdated, it needs a renewal of sorts. And she points out that most of them probably aren't aware that the language already underwent that particular period of modernization and renewal. And that's why it's able to stand the test of time and still be in such prevalent use today.